right, thank you.
What are you taking the coffee?
Black coffee.
Okay.
We should. But you can introduce it.
Okay, then I'll do it. All right. So, welcome everyone. My name is Jackie Ben-John, and I have the distinguished pleasure of introducing Professor Njoki Wane to today's session. Professor Wane is a recognized scholar in the areas of Black feminisms, African indigenous knowledges, African women, and spirituality. Among her most recent publications is Indigenous African Knowledge Production, Food Processing Practices Among Kenyan Rural Women. She has co-authored an anti-racist training manual, Equity in Practice Transformational Training Resource, with Larissa Karen Cross, Ruptures, Anti-Colonial and Anti-Racist Feminist Theorizing, with Jennifer Jagger and Zara Murad, a handbook on African traditional healing approaches and research practices with Erica Negan. She has co-edited Spirituality, Education, and Society, an integrated approach with Energy Maniemo and Eric Ritzkes, and The Politics of Cultural Knowledge with Arlo Kemp and Marlon Simmons. Professor Wane headed the Office of Teaching Support from 2009 to 2012. She's been nominated TBO Best Lecturer and is the recipient of the Harry Jerome Professional Excellence Award and of the African Women Achievement Award in 2007. She is also a recipient of the prestigious David E. Hunt Award for Excellence in Graduate Education for 2015. Today, Professor Wane is addressing spiritual discourse in leadership, implications for education. Join me in welcoming Professor Wane.
Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me to be part of this, and thank you for coming. I know it's March break, and I was sort of hesitant. Should I accept it or should I not? Then I said, well, it's, you know, you're just at home trying to read theses, and sometimes you can't even read them. So why not break that and come? So it's so thank you, and thank you for the introduction. I start by, you know, like when I think of leadership, it's a very difficult concept. It's difficult to define. But I always say that when we are talking about leadership, I have two basic arguments that I use. Leadership is inner leadership precedes outer leadership. That is, you cannot be a leader if you yourself, you're not a leader of your own life, of your own issues. Because if you live a chaotic life, if you live a life that is not together, it's very difficult to take up a leadership role and start trying to help others to be organized, to be together. So that's one. The second argument that I have is leadership is not about managing things, but developing people. So when I think about leadership, it's not it's not making sure that all the tables are well organized. It's not about making sure, yeah, I mean, part of leadership could be organizing the amenities, the foods, and so on and so forth. But it's how, for me, it's leadership, how to ensure that the people that are under me are actually acquiring the skills to be able to stand by themselves and be leaders of their own lives as well. If it's in an academic setting, being a leader, being a dean, being a chair of a department, being a student who, you know, who has taken up particular leadership roles, it's help seeing what is it that each one of the people under me have talents, and how can those talents be realized? How can we work together as a community to develop those talents? So those are the two. If you don't get anything else from this talk, Those are the two main things that I always talk about in terms of inner leadership. And leadership is not about managing things, but developing people, paying attention to people, to people's needs, to people's talents, and so on and so forth. Why did I become interested in issues of leadership, and in particular spiritual leadership? I've been teaching a course on spirituality and schooling for the last more than 10 years. And that in itself, as I was listening to Professor Miller, attending Professor Miller's talks, being part of the conferences he used to organize, sort of opened my eyes, and I thought there is something that we're missing in the academy. And at that time, I never used to talk about my own spirituality, but I thought, probably I need to be courageous enough and start teaching a course of spirituality. And I take a very different approach from how Professor Miller teaches his course. I don't do meditation. I do a grounding exercise at the beginning. And so the emphasis of my course is to show that spirituality is part and parcel of our everyday life. And spirituality, whatever you do, whether you're writing, whether you're researching, whether you are talking to people, spirituality has to be central. Because we are all spiritual beings, okay? And if you're a spiritual being and we are energy being, if we do not pay attention to my relationship with everything that surrounds me, if I don't pay attention to the nature, if I don't pay attention to the relationship within me, then I'm missing something. And hence the reason why, so when you write, you need to ask yourself, whatever I'm writing, is it going to be hurting people, or is it going to be developing people? When you're doing your research, are you going to make your research a dirty project, as Linda Smith talks about research being dirty? Are you going to ensure that by the time you leave your research site, people will be energized, people will be saying, wow, we never thought of this, and so on and so forth. So whatever you do, whether it is relationships, you should consider them sacred. So it's actually a very interconnected way of looking at spirituality. So I teach spirituality in terms of being a methodology, in terms of being a theory, and in terms of being a tool for which you can regulate your own life. The second reason why I got interested in spirituality and leadership is because having been in a leadership role or in administration role from 2009 to 2014, first as the director of Office of Teaching, and I was also director of the Center for Integrative and Racist Studies, and the final one was being the advisor for the Vice President, Equity and Human Resources and Equity. I observed in terms of what is happening. How do different leaders interact with different people? How do different leaders, when you go into meetings, how do they treat the people who are in the meeting room? How do leaders, when they are communicating in terms of emails, in terms of memos, what is the content, what is the tone of the memos? So it's very, very interesting. So it was because of that through my observation, I felt maybe I need to look at spiritual leadership and see whether there is something that we can sit with when a person is in a position of leadership. We can actually use spirituality as a form of tool to govern or to be part of your teaching. And also the third reason was, how can you as a leader in such a complex world create authenticity within yourself? It's very difficult because many times you have to play to the forces maybe that have appointed you. And I again felt there is a need, instead of just speculating, a need to do research in this area. I put in a couple of proposals to the SHAC. I guess they did not think there is merit in getting money in leadership, spirituality in leadership, and I didn't get the money, but I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying until I get the money to do the research, so that whatever my observation, my speculation can be backed down, can be supported by research. When you talk about leaders, and finally, I teach a course on women in leadership positions. So that's a course that I started teaching at the beginning of January. It's a lovely course. Oh, nobody is in there. It's a great course. We are enjoying it, and it's a large class, but it's fantastic. It's a good class. And some of the things that I have shared with the students, I'll be sharing them with you. Because when, in a nutshell, when we talk about leaders, because it's good to start from what are leaders, and when we think of successful leaders, what is it that we are looking for, and then look at how will spirituality enhance their leadership. But before I do that, when we think of leadership or leadership styles, we have charismatic leaders, we have social justice leaders or social justice leadership, gender and race leadership, moral leadership, spiritual leadership, authoritarian, participative, transformational, and so on and so forth. And many times it's very difficult to actually tell the difference between especially transformational, spiritual, moral, social justice, gender and race leadership. But when you actually start looking at the tenets or the principles of spiritual leadership, you start seeing the difference. So if you are interested in finding out a little bit more, you need to take my class when I offer it next time. A good pitch. So successful leaders develop, they have a vision. And that is based on their personal and professional values, and take every opportunity to influence their employees, their teachers, their staff to share their vision. So if, let's say, because let's say I'm a head of a unit, I will share with my students, with my employees, with the staff, and say this is where I want us to go, and this is and spell it out. And do you find yourself being drawn to any of this vision that I have? Where are the tensions when you think of your own career in terms of, let's say, as a student? Where are the tensions in terms of my vision for this particular unit? Where do you think you can go if you try, like, let's say, I'll give an example, the students who are in the social justice department. If you are a student in the social justice department, I would like to know, why are you enrolled in that? What particular aspect of your life or in your career path, where do you want to see change taking place? Is it, and I always talk about laminated equity. Is it to feel good that you're taking, you're in a social justice department, or actually you have a commitment to change people's lives, to be part of people's transformation, to be part of a transformative world, to be a part of where you treat relationships sacred, and so on and so forth. So it's not easy being a leader who shares a vision and who wants everybody else to share that vision with them, because there could be conflict. And also successful leaders, they influence others rather than telling them, you have to follow me. Because if you follow me, I'll give you this, I'll give you this, I'll give you this. So you influence others so that they are drawn to you. You become part of who they are. not in terms of, if you do this, I'm buying coffee. Like trade-offs. So don't do that. And then their style is intentional and ensures that everybody develops a sense of belonging in the organization. So that when you wake up in the morning, oh, I want to go to school because my department or my organization is so good I can't stay away from it. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's a question of trying. And many times when we talk about leadership, we can measure the style of leadership even without spelling it out. Organization climate. Is it a chilly climate? Is it a place where, if let's say you want to converse with, oh my God, I shouldn't be saying that. Oh my God, I wonder whether there is a camera in the ceiling. Whether being taped. Like literally so that's a chilly climate. Or if let's say you're a professor and you're teaching and you say, oh my God, I hope my students will not go and sell me out because of my way of teaching and so on and so forth. So you can actually measure leadership styles by how the climate within an organization and also the behavior of the leader. And again, it can be a leader who is very vocal, who is very transparent in their arguments and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they could be masking something we do not know. And also, you can also take measurements of an organization by doing what I call organizational health inventory. Take time. Talk to everybody. How do you feel? What do you think of me? I mean, you might get nasty comments, but take those comments as a way of improving and thank when you get the inventory and say, wow, yeah, I need to pay attention to this, I need to pay attention to that. Now, my focus, spiritual leadership. Why should leaders embrace spirituality? Those are the questions I'm asking. Why should leaders embrace spirituality? What has been the impact of separating the spirituality from our own leadership practices? And the third question is, what is spiritual leadership? I don't know whether I need to go to define spirituality. Probably what I'll do is, to make it more interesting, is maybe go around the room and check your take on spirituality.
My take on spirituality is that Dylan Thomas said it's the force, the green force that produces the flower. Mm-hmm. It's the life force within us that is called spirit or soul or there are many different words for it, but it's that non-material force within me that allows me to be myself.
Excellent. Did you read my notes?
No.
Just kidding.
I'm just talking off the top of my head here.
Exactly. So that in itself is very authentic way of looking at spirituality. And it came from her soul. It came from, because it's that force, that green thing that will propel and produce flowers. We can't even understand it. We can't even understand it. Can you imagine if we put that force in an organization? What will happen? That authentic force that will produce what you're looking for. That authentic force that will put a smile on everybody's face. That authentic force that will make people talk and talk freely without being scared, without being fearful. Thank you, that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess I see it as basically the fact that we're all like interconnected and interdependent, and I see it also as like the universe, I suppose, like working towards the thriving of life through means of love. So it's sort of tapping into that both individually and collectively in a community sense as well.
Very good, very good. Again, you read my notes. but that's okay. Interconnectedness. Because what Kim does, in one way or another, will affect me, will affect Janelle, will affect us. So keeping, as I said, a relationship as secret, that interconnectedness. What I do, I mean, it's easy to talk, I'll be honest. It's easy to talk, and it's easy to say, oh, if you do this, if you do this. But imagine if we were to think as we sip our morning coffee, just to show the interconnectedness. If we are to think of the women who wake up early in the morning, you are from Arusha, you know, they wake up early in the morning to pick the berries, the red berries. And as they are picking, they are looking at them, they are admiring them. And they take them to the factory. And they end up in Toronto. Just looking at that connectivity and how grateful we should be that those women, despite the fact that they get very little, they do it because they love what they do. So and then at the same time, when we from an international perspective, when we find that chemicals are being sold by international organizations to spray the coffee, to destroy the lives of the people, we should pick up our placards and oppose them, and write to them or do anything that we can to ensure that the coffee that we are taking is actually organic coffee. Thank you.
So those are great examples. So for me, I would say the first thing that came to my mind was connection.
Mm-hmm.
So be it interconnectedness or like our connection to ourselves and to others.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think it's something that we often push back. We're not very, at least in this type of space or setting, we're not very aware of it. It's something that guides us though, our actions, our reactions, and how we feel, and what we do and what influences us to do and to be. But it's something that I don't think we consciously even regard. But I feel like it's our connection, and different people have different ways of, different needs of connecting. So different types of spirituality. It might mean one thing for me, another thing for Kim. But I think it comes back to that.
Excellent. Yeah. So spirituality, the good thing is it's not connected to any religion. It can come from your own background. It can come from your own religion. It's and it's there. You know, it's innate. It's in us. It's what we just need to inner leadership to go inside and get it, because it's always present. That is that presence of it. Thank you.
When I think of spirituality, I think of the idea of a mind, body, and spirit. So the spirit being something that like senses, or like it's a way of knowing that's sort of intuitive and like insightful. So I sort of think of a story that I share with my students is The Little Prince, The Pink Prince. And there's a quote in it that says, like, one cannot really see with the eyes what's essential is invisible, so you can only really see the invisible through your heart, or through this invisible insight that you have. So I think that invisible insight is
very, very good. Wow. That's powerful. Yeah.
Well, I've read your books. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have done a course, my very first course at OISE with spirituality in schooling with Njoki, as well as spirituality in education with Jack Miller at the same time. So I got those two different perspectives that you're talking about. But one thing I remember, and that comes to mind based on what's been said so far and my own experience of spirituality, is what, Njoki, I remember you saying, ritualize your life. And that ritual, so I think that ritual is what really brings out that spirituality from us in our own individual ways, and coming from our own experiences and backgrounds and stuff. So, and I think I still haven't fully figured out what spirituality really is, and I think it's something that's a lifelong process, a lifelong, experience and of who we are and who we are becoming every time we experience nature, when we interact with others, when we really want to live and grow. So yeah, I don't know yet, but hopefully by the end of this session, I might know a little bit more about spirituality, which will, again, help me fully define what it is. But for now, I just think it's, like Mary said, it's that force. But I could just see it coming from the inside out, yet coming back in, and that flow from the inside out, and this ritual, this idea of continually seeking to be the best that we can be.
Yeah, to actually connect with what the previous person said, in terms of mind, body, and soul, and connectivity, that's connectivity. And it's interesting about the notion of visualizing your life, because it sort of, it doesn't make your life too solid and too regimented, but it's, like I'll give you an example. This morning I was running late, and usually I sit down at least for 5 to 10 minutes and just breathe in and breathe out, and try to see whether I can connect to my Creator, myself, the people around me, ask for forgiveness, and so on and so forth. And then I say, oh my God, it's going to 10, what do I do? I need to prepare my smoothie, I need, yeah. For my body, And I said, Njoki, calm down. Go downstairs, sit down, and do your ritual. And actually I did that. And I said, my Creator, make the roads, because I live 40 kilometers from here, clear the highways so that there is no traffic, so that I just drive smoothly. And I did that. So when I got to Don Valley, the traffic was heavy. I said, Lord, what happened? I requested, so you can have a conversation. I requested for the roads to be clear. And then I said, if you're zooming through, you could get into an accident, so calm down. And so I took my time. And in a way, I loved it, because I was worried I'll be late. But I just came in at perfect timing when Jack Miller was ending his talk. And yeah, so ritualizing, it can be very, very difficult. But having certain things where you're paying attention to your mind, body, and soul can energize you and sort of center you or recenter you or bring you back to that space, so that you can have a conversation. And my family do know that sometimes I talk to myself, so they know I'm not crazy. It's a way of saying, Njoki, yeah, you need to, you haven't done that. My family knows if I have not lit candles or burnt sage for and incenses, they say, what's happening? We need to do the cleansing, the spiritual cleansing of the house, and all kinds of things. So ritualizing. Thank you for reminding me that. Thank you. Yeah.
I also had the pleasure of taking Professor Wane's spirituality course, and I went into that course with, I think, a fairly narrow definition of spirituality, and then I left just thinking way out there. So when you say that, I'm still, don't have a definition, I gave up on the definition because I realized I don't need a definition of spirituality. It's everything we've heard everyone say already. So I would just echo that. And I think for me, spirituality is also about my connection to the broader environment. So yes, it's everything we've heard around people and that interpersonal connection, but for me it's also my community, my environment, It's the plants, it's the animals, and it's also a connection to my ancestors. So that's another important piece for me when I think about, well, what is spirituality? I think of those who have come before me, and their spirit is within me, and I think it helps to sustain me. So that's the other thing for me, that spirituality helps to, I think, help me to feel strong and nurtured and whole. And it has a lot to do with all of the work that my ancestors did for me to be here, to be in this space with you.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, go ahead. I know you have quite a lot.
He tried rolling back to disappear into the wall.
Okay, tell us.
I think spirituality is the connection to the broader environment,
Excellent.
from the plants, animals, and ancestors.
Okay,
And it helps me become stronger and whole.
very good. Are you sure you never took my class? Excellent.
You know what? He actually attended some of your classes when I did my master's. He was
small.
5 weeks old. Yeah. Yeah. And students used to hold him, and I said to him, "You'd never cry." You know, different students can hold him in the room, and he'd just go around the table. So he did take parts of your classes that I was taking back when I did my master's. So he's 12 now.
What you say is very powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So much has already been said, and I feel like so much remains to be said, of course, because spirituality is so massive. But I think spirituality is everything that's bigger than ourselves, bigger than what is tangible, bigger than what is physical. And each of us has a piece of something that's bigger inside of us that also connects all of us as human beings, also with all of creation and beyond. I think one other thing from the last session, Jacques Miller talked a lot about love, and I think that spirituality cannot exist without love. Spirituality, life force is, I think, such a fantastic word to describe spirituality, and I think that love is a central part also of that life force.
Wow, yeah, love. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
First of all, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I guess I'll talk about like where I see spirituality to kind of like see if I can make an image of it. I think it's like this force that people typically use to affirm the sense of self and to kind of guide choices in terms of what they feel to be, the highest form of goodness. And it's interesting for me because I consider myself to be a very spiritual person, but I have a lot of people in my life who I love very much who will say that they are not spiritual at all, but I disagree. One of them is my father, who's a physicist, and he took me to church every Sunday when I was growing up, but he would always tell me that he doesn't believe in God, but if you really start to talk to him about what he believes, you'll find that he does have a sense of spirituality. He talks about going to church because of the community aspect of it. And, things in academia like giving credit where credit is due. Why should you do that? Because this person put their life into this, and so you've got to make sure you put their name on it. All these things that sort of guide his senses of what to do in certain situations. The other one is a good friend of mine from undergraduate who was a college football player who used to kind of tease me for talking about spiritual things. But once you get him talking about football, he would say things like, you need to prioritize nutrition over flavor. Why do that? Because you have to take care of your body. Or he would say, you need to only celebrate a win for one day and only mourn a loss for one day. Things like this. So people have these senses, these like structures that they use to make these choices. And because you make it yourself, it's really in your own terms. And I really identified with what you said about ancestors, because I hear my grandmother's voices in my head all the time. That's the way I do it. And I sometimes tell people that like I built my own spirituality based on that. I'm sure there's a name for it somewhere. But yeah, that's how I see it. There's, you know, this thing that keeps people going and tells them who they are and what to do, and they build it based on whatever works for them, you know.
That's powerful. Can you feel the energy? The energy is actually growing in this room. You know, like sometimes the energy becomes so powerful, you feel like spinning around. So thank you for sharing. Lynn?
I'll go last.
Okay.
I think I have actually two comments. The number one is I have been interested in spirituality for some time in my life because I was never taught about this before in school, and this is something that you learn later. And one of the many things that I've noticed is how come is that something related to spirituality, meditation, and all these topics, usually women are the ones who attend to these issues, as if we, the men, don't belong, or we are not allowed to talk about these issues, and we have 3 men here today. And I wonder first, like, why is this happening that more males are interested in these things, but I'm interested, and I learned this later down the road. So for me, spirituality is that relationship that I have with the others, and that relationship complements me and makes me a better human being. So in other words, I am not myself. I don't exist unless I am in a relation with the other. And the last part is I believe that by having these conversations, we need to infuse our schools with more of these discussions, because we don't have these at all in our schools, and I think we're missing a piece of the puzzle, especially in primary education, for example.
Thank you so much. That's excellent. Wow. More men need to join us. Something to research on as to why it's the majority who attend these spaces. Even my classes, the majority are the women, especially the spirituality class. What's happening? Because they're spiritual beings as well.
My name is Suzanne and I work for the Social Justice Education Department. And I'm a student in a different department, and I'm taking a leadership course at the moment in LHAE. And one thing I connected from your talk to my course is being mindful. Being mindful about who you are, where you come from, where you are going, and also being mindful about the people around you. And kind of reflecting that to your leadership, even if it's an everyday leadership, even if you're not in a leadership position. Accepting things as they come and believing everything happens for a reason.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Yeah, it's not a coincidence you're here. That's good.
Well, no one's ever asked me what I think about spirituality.
So
So thank you for
Yeah.
As a labor activist, we're taught to be materialists. You can't touch it or feel it or eat it or drink it. But I think that even labor activists are very spiritual people. I think in terms of how I understand it, spirituality, I think there's both meaning and belonging. That things can have very deep meaning. That was what gives us purpose and drive and gets us up and out of bed in the morning. So we just be there. And also belonging, a sense of belonging and connectedness. But I think those two things can be very separate as well. And that's some of the most meaningful things. You can have no sense of belonging whatsoever as an activist. You know, no one wants to hear from you, no one wants you to be there, but you're there, and it's really meaningful for you and meaningful for the things you do. And there are ways where you can belong to a group or a process, but be just going through the motions. It has absolutely no meaning to you. So I think meaning and belonging and how those two things intersect and how they're separate.
That's very deep. Because if there is that deep connection in your commitment to what you're doing, there is a spiritual aspect in that. Because you're not just doing it, as I said, from a material aspect of it. You're doing it so that you can see a better tomorrow, not only for you but for other people. So that is very deep. So thank you for sharing that. Lee?
Well, thank you so much. It's getting better and better. Today is a day devoted to connections between everything, mind, body, spirit, and world. When Professor Beatty started, I made a connection with Rumi's verse. Rumi is a 13th century Sufi poet. So he said in one translation, "What was said to the rose to make it open was said to me." And this is what all of you are doing. So I'm grateful to be part of this group and part of the experience. Thinking about spirituality, I think it's important for human beings to try to move away from words themselves, but look to the meaning, what those words actually stand for. Because doing that, people realize that we're much more often on the same page. Oftentimes words separate us. So I totally agree that the spiritual may be spiritual not under the word spirituality. Again, in my experience, just like you said before, people who do not identify themselves as spiritual are much gentler, much more respectful, much safer to be around, if you can put it that way, than people who claim spirituality and make war on the world and everybody else. So the few things I'm thinking about is listening and making time, especially in this time of no time, making time to be able to hear somebody else and something else. It's everything around us, people certainly, but even plants. This is what I will be talking about in the next session, listening to the plants in this building. So anyone who wants to join the repotting campaign to keep the plants alive so that we are alive with them and beside them. And the other difficult thing I've been thinking a lot about is trust in leadership and spirituality in leadership. Drop your fear and do your best to open up to another. Whenever I think I have succeeded to do this, I think I've convinced myself to believe in something ultimate that is good, or vice versa, something good that is ultimate, that takes care of the good end of things, good developments. So this is how I did this conference.
So thank you for starting the ball. You know, it's actually, you could see every flower opening as everybody was speaking. Thank you for that. So in summary, this is when everybody talked, I said it's like, you know, they have read my notes because I say spirituality implies a relationship with what people variously refer to as the life force, God, creator, the higher self, or purpose, or the great mystery. What is essential, however, is how you define your own spirituality. And going around the room, everybody literally defined their own spirituality as a way of life, a methodology, a practice through which one lives and aspires towards his or her goals and ambitions and their connection to the collective well-being of society. In one way or another, we did talk about that. And then I also said, you know, like when I think of, especially as people are talking, you know, is spirituality a big light, like, you know, and this image of somebody sort of feeling, you know, like sometimes you feel inspired, you feel some inspiration from somewhere, or you feel you can hear a voice from somewhere. Is that what we refer to as spirituality? Some of you sort of talked about in terms of, the ancestry. Is it like asking ourselves what is human? What is to be human? Because I think that's a constant question we need to ask ourselves. What is it to be human? Is it going back to the source, as Capra talks about it, to re-educate ourselves? Is it going to, to the source to find different meanings for different people at different forms? What do we need to do to be human? What do we need to, because, and I'll tell you this, whenever I think of how we have allowed the world to be classified by something superficial as skin color, it scares me. And I think it's very important that we can actually see how a whole dogma was built on something so superficial. But if we put ourselves to the notion of being human and what it means to be human, then we can be able to rupture that and look at the structures that has boxed us to certain things that we don't want to be part of, or systems and educate. So to be human is actually knowing that the breath that is coming from each one of us is connecting us, and we talked about that. The breath that we breathe in and out connects all of us, regardless of who we are. So to be human, the notion of Sankofa, the notion of Sankofa, going back to the source. However, what I want to emphasize in the next couple of minutes is about spiritual leadership. According to Malone and Fry, they say that spiritual leadership is a casual leadership model for organizational transformation, and it is designed to create an intrinsically motivated learning organization. Spiritual leadership incorporates vision, hope, faith, love, theories of workplace, and spiritual survival through calling and membership. So that when you're talking about spiritual leadership, we are all part of the leadership. We are all part of the collective. Our voices matter in what is happening. It becomes very, very, very important. And what is the purpose of spiritual leadership? And I've talked about that, is to create a vision. And it's to create congruency across an institution, is to, it's to be strategic in what you're doing, is to empower every person in an organization, in a school, in an institution. And it's to ensure that it's not just for the top management or the middle management, it's for everybody. It's for the administrators, for teaching staff, for students, for faculty, for staff, everybody. It's part of, so that everybody can actualize their higher self. Because if you're a spiritual being and we are in tune with what we are doing, and there is congruency in our work, in our research, in our writing, in our teaching, in our learning, you can imagine the potential that you'll be able to actualize. Because as we all know that we only actualize 10% of our potential. So if we are in an environment where the leader is saying, listen, you are a leader in your own right, you are a leader in your own field, it will be able to maybe increase the 10% to 11% or 12%. In other words, with the spiritual leadership, it means creation of alignment of individuals' goals to those of the institution or the organization. So that so that you don't just come to work or go to school for the sake of going to school because you are going there for a particular purpose. When we talk about spiritual leadership, it means that the leader creates new pathways of understanding for both the people who are under them or within the organization, whether they are students, staff, faculty. My spirit is saying I shouldn't talk too much. I don't know. Sometimes when I call, I say, what's the message? Should I take a break? But they say no, I should continue. So spiritual leaders, they reflect deeply on their own experiences. And so at the end of the day, when they go home, they actually reflect and say, how did I make those decisions? How did I interact with everybody? How did I join conversations with the people? They also examine the consequences of their decision making. And you know, as a leader, you have to make decisions. You have to fire people. You have to discipline people. So you have to look at it in terms of what are the consequences. I do remember when I was taking, long time ago, when I was taking a management course on cross-cultural communication. It was very interesting to see in, within the Chinese leadership style, when they have to make a decision, like for instance, fire somebody, they say, if I fire this person, it's going to affect his family, it's going to affect the buyers of the products, it's going, like the ripple effect of one particular decision, it's not just one individual, it actually becomes a whole community, which I thought was, whoa, very interesting. And also it's like, and also the other thing I found when I took that course, it's like when you meet other leaders, the first thing is if it's a business proposition, let's do it now. But with the Chinese administrators, they say no, have coffee, have tea, let's have lunch, let's get to know each other. They want to know the soul, they want to know the person, they don't want just to, they want to know the substance of your, like if you're going after their business, is it just for the business or there is something more, which I found was very, very interesting. And in terms of spiritual leaders, coming back to my note, they hold constant dialogues with the people around them. Constant dialogue. What do you think of that? What do you think of this? They test the waters. What do you think will